At my baby's first birthday party, the room was full of balloons, laughter, and the smell of fresh cake. But then, in the middle of it all, my mother-in-law turned to me, pointed at my daughter, and said words I'll never forget. "This child isn't really family. Adopted kids don't count. Real blood is what matters." Her voice cut through the room like a knife. I froze, holding Clara, my 1-year-old little girl who had just learned to clap her hands. My husband, Daniel, stood a few feet away, his face pale, eyes fixed on the floor. My father, Henry, and my sister, Marissa, both sat stunned in silence. No one spoke up. Not one person defended my daughter. In that moment, I felt something break inside me. This was supposed to be Clara's day, a day filled with love and celebration. Instead, the people around me allowed her to be erased, treated as if she didn't belong. I pulled Clara close, kissed the top of her head, and said clearly, "We're leaving." The room fell into an even deeper silence. I could feel every pair of eyes on me as I carried my daughter toward the door. Then I stopped and turned back. They thought this party was being hosted in Daniel's family home. They thought this celebration was theirs, but they were wrong. And as I looked straight at my mother-in-law, I told them the truth. What none of you know is that the house you're standing in, the one you're celebrating in today, isn't yours. It isn't Daniel's. It's mine. The morning of Clara's first birthday felt like magic. I woke up early, humming to myself as I carried trays of cupcakes into the kitchen. Bright pink balloons floated against the ceiling, streamers hung across the living room, and a giant number 1 stood proudly in the corner. I had planned this day for weeks, wanting it to be perfect, not just for Clara, but for everyone who came. Clara was already clapping her little hands from her high chair, her dark curls bouncing as she laughed at the decorations. She had no idea what the day meant, but her joy filled every corner of the room. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "This is your day, baby girl." For me, becoming a mother wasn't simple. Years earlier, I faced heartbreak after heartbreak trying to have a child. Adoption wasn't a backup plan. It was the way my daughter came into my life. And from the moment I held her, I knew she was mine in every way that mattered. Daniel, my husband, came into the kitchen carrying a box of party favors. He smiled at Clara but avoided looking at me for too long, like he was already nervous about how the day would unfold. His mother, Lorna, never hid her opinions about adoption. She had made little remarks before, quiet enough to dismiss, sharp enough to wound, but I hoped today would be different. My father, Henry, had promised to arrive early to help set up. He was a steady presence in my life, a man who believed in quiet strength. My sister, Marissa, was coming too, always the loudest laugh in the room, though she had warned me before, "Evelyn, you know Lorna's going to try something." I brushed it off, telling her that family would come together for Clara, that this day wasn't about old grudges or cruel words. As guests began to arrive, I looked around at the people gathering in my home. The house was filled with chatter, the kind that comes when relatives who don't see each other often gather under one roof. The smell of fried chicken and homemade casseroles mixed with the sugary sweetness of the cake I had ordered. Children ran through the hallways, their laughter echoing off the walls. I kept reminding myself that this was what mattered: love, laughter, and the joy of seeing my daughter surrounded by people who should care for her. My chest swelled with pride as I thought, she will grow up knowing she is chosen, cherished, and deeply loved. But beneath that joy, I felt a faint undercurrent of tension. Lorna sat stiffly in a corner, her lips pressed tight as she watched me move from guest to guest. Her sharp eyes lingered on Clara a little too long, and every time I caught her gaze, my stomach tightened. Still, I kept smiling, determined not to let anything ruin the celebration. When the cake was finally carried out and everyone gathered around to sing, I held Clara in my arms, her tiny hands reaching for the candles. For a moment, everything was perfect. Family voices rose together, and Clara giggled, basking in the sound. But I didn't know that in seconds, that perfect moment would shatter. The candles flickered, and Clara's round little face lit up with joy as the song came to an end. Everyone clapped, their voices overlapping with laughter. I leaned down and helped her blow out the single candle, pretending that her tiny puff of air had done the trick. Applause filled the room, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had been wrong to worry. Maybe Lorna would let the day pass without her sharp tongue cutting into us. I began slicing the cake, handing out plates as people lined up. Clara smeared frosting on her nose, squealing with delight, and the room echoed with the kind of joy I had wanted for her all along. My father chuckled as he snapped photos, Marissa leaned over to whisper silly jokes into Clara's ear, and Daniel busied himself pouring drinks. The moment felt safe, ordinary, the way family celebrations should be. And then, out of nowhere, Lorna cleared her throat. It was a sharp, deliberate sound that sliced through the laughter, the kind of sound that made everyone stop mid-sentence. Forks hovered in the air, conversations cut short, and eyes turned toward the corner where she sat with her arms crossed tightly against her chest. "I need to say something," she announced. Her tone carried a weight that demanded silence, and silence is exactly what she got. I felt my stomach knot. My hands gripped the knife tighter as I set it down on the counter. Something inside me knew this was it, the moment Marissa had warned me about, the moment I had prayed wouldn't come. Lorna stood slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from her blouse as if she were preparing for a performance. Her eyes swept across the room before landing squarely on me and Clara. She raised her chin, and in a voice that was calm but laced with ice, she said, "This child isn't really family." The words seemed to hang in the air, thick and poisonous. My breath caught, and I felt Clara shift in my arms, still giggling, oblivious to the cruelty directed at her. Lorna wasn't finished. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "Adopted kids don't count. Real blood is what matters." The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint ticking of the wall clock, even the rustle of someone's clothing as they shifted uncomfortably. But no one spoke. Not a single person challenged her. Daniel froze, his hand still on a cup mid-pour. His shoulders tensed, but his mouth stayed shut. My father lowered his camera, his face pale, eyes darting between me and Lorna as though torn about what to do. Marissa bit her lip hard, her hands balled into fists at her sides, but even she stayed quiet. I wanted someone, anyone, to step in, to break the silence, to defend my daughter, but the silence stretched longer, and with each passing second, it screamed louder than any words ever could. Inside, my heart pounded so violently I thought it might break my ribs. My arms tightened protectively around Clara, who babbled happily, her frosting-covered hands reaching for my necklace. She didn't understand the weight of what had just been said, but one day she would, and I refused to let this moment be the foundation of how she saw herself. I looked around the room, searching for a sign of support. My father's jaw was tight, his eyes heavy with guilt. Marissa's face was red, anger simmering beneath the surface. Daniel avoided my gaze entirely, his head lowered as though he wished the floor would swallow him whole. The betrayal stung worse than Lorna's words. The people I loved, the people I thought would stand for us, were choosing silence. "Are you serious right now?" I finally asked, my voice steady but trembling underneath. "You're looking at a 1-year-old child and telling her she doesn't count?" Lorna didn't flinch. Her expression hardened. "I'm saying the truth. Family is blood. You can't change that." I felt my cheeks burn. My body trembled with a mix of rage and heartbreak. Every memory of rocking Clara to sleep, every night I stayed up comforting her cries, every smile, every laugh, all of it was being dismissed as nothing. I pulled Clara closer and pressed my cheek against her soft curls. My voice shook, but it carried through the silence. "She is my daughter. She is loved. She is family." Lorna scoffed, folding her arms tighter. "Say what you want. Blood will always matter more than paper." That was the moment the air shifted inside me. I realized I'd been waiting for someone else to speak up. For Daniel, for my father, for Marissa, but no one did. It hit me that if I didn't act, Clara's first birthday would be remembered not for balloons and cake, but for shame and silence. The weight of the room pressed down, but under that weight, a new strength rose in me. I wasn't just Evelyn, the daughter, the sister, or the wife who stayed quiet to keep peace. I was Clara's mother, And her mother would never let her believe she was anything less than chosen, cherished, and wholly ours. The knife I had set down still sat on the counter, but I didn't need it. My words would cut sharper than anything Lorna could ever wield. I lifted Clara higher in my arms, turned to face the room, and said clearly, "We're leaving." The silence grew heavier, thick with shock. Gasps echoed faintly, and for the first time, Lorna's eyes widened. She hadn't expected me to fight back. She hadn't expected me to claim my power in front of everyone. I stepped forward, every beat of my heart thundering in my chest, every step a declaration. I refused to let Clara grow up in a world where she was made to feel less than. The conflict had begun, and I knew there was no going back. When I said, "We're leaving," the words seemed to slam into the room. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one even breathed. Clara rested her head against my shoulder, her tiny fingers curling into my blouse, as if she somehow sensed the storm swirling around us. My pulse pounded in my ears, but my voice had been steady, and that steadiness shocked even me. I turned toward the door, but before I took another step, I forced myself to stop. If I walked out in silence, Lorna's words would hang in the air as if they were true, as if no one had dared to challenge them. That would not be the memory etched into my daughter's first birthday. I shifted Clara in my arms and faced everyone. "You all sat here," I said, scanning their faces. "You all heard what she said, and not one of you spoke up for Clara. Not one of you defended my daughter." Daniel flinched. His hands twitched as if he wanted to reach for me, but he stayed rooted in place, his eyes glued to the floor. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again, his shoulders sinking with shame. Marissa's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, biting her lips so hard it turned white. Lorna scoffed, breaking the silence. "Don't turn this into a scene, Evelyn. It's just the truth. You can't change what blood means. You should know better than to pretend otherwise." Her calmness made the fury inside me burn hotter. I felt my voice rise, not with screaming, but with strength. The truth? The truth is that this child is mine. I feed her. I comfort her when she cries in the middle of the night. I celebrate her first steps and her first words. That is what makes a mother, not blood. Love. My father shifted uncomfortably, murmuring, "Lorna, maybe this isn't the time." But she cut him off with a sharp glare. "Don't defend her," she snapped. "I'm saying what everyone else is thinking." Marissa finally spoke, her voice cracking as she said, "No, you're not. You're saying what you're cruel enough to say out loud." But even then, her words were quiet, hesitant, drowned by the weight of the moment. I realized then that waiting for them to stand up for me was pointless. If I wanted to protect Clara, I had to stand alone. And maybe that was exactly what motherhood demanded, sacrificing comfort for strength. I held Clara higher in my arms, her cheek pressed to mine. "We're leaving," I repeated, this time louder, more final. The sound of chairs shifting and nervous whispers filled the room. Guests looked from me to Lorna, their eyes wide, unsure of where to place their loyalty. I didn't give them the chance to decide. I walked toward the door, my steps measured and strong. But before I turned the knob, I stopped once more. My heart pounded with the weight of what I was about to say, but I knew this was the moment to end her hold over me. "You've all been celebrating in this house today," I said, my voice ringing clear. "You assumed it was Daniel's, or maybe that it belonged to his family. But the truth is, this house isn't his. It isn't yours. It's mine. I bought it with the inheritance my mother left me. A woman who knew better than anyone that family isn't about blood. It's about love and loyalty. So when you insult my daughter under this roof, you're insulting me in my own home." The words seemed to strike Lorna like a physical blow. Her face drained of color, her mouth opened, then snapped shut again. She looked around as though searching for someone to defend her, but no one did. Daniel finally lifted his head, his face pale. His lips parted, but no words came out. His silence stung, but it no longer held me back. I stepped closer to the doorway. "Clara will grow up in a home where she is wanted, where she is loved, and where she never has to question her worth. If that means walking away from all of you, then that's exactly what I'll do." Gasps rippled through the guests. My father reached out a hand as if to stop me, but he didn't move from his chair. Marissa's eyes shone with regret, her mouth forming silent words. She couldn't bring herself to speak. I turned the knob, my daughter secure in my arms, and opened the door. The cold air from outside rushed in, bracing and sharp against my skin, but it felt freeing. For the first time that day, I could breathe. Behind me, I heard the rustle of movement. Daniel's voice finally broke through the silence, uncertain and quiet but desperate. "Evelyn, wait." I paused, but I didn't turn around. I wasn't going to beg for his support. If he wanted to stand by us, he would have to choose it for himself. My heart was racing, but my mind had never been clearer. I had made my decision. I was not going to let my daughter grow up believing that her place in this family was conditional, that she had to earn love she already deserved. This was the turning point, not just for the day, but for the life I was determined to build for Clara, a life defined not by silence or shame, but by courage and unconditional love. I tightened my hold on her, kissed the top of her soft curls, and stepped fully into the doorway. If they wanted us back, they would have to meet us with respect. If they couldn't, then Clara and I would walk into a future without them. I didn't look back. The cold air rushed in as I stood in the doorway, Clara tucked against my chest, her tiny hand gripping the collar of my blouse. My decision was final. I was ready to walk away and never look back. But behind me, Daniel's voice broke through the stunned silence. "Evelyn, wait!" The words trembled out of him, uncertain, almost pleading. For a heartbeat, I froze. I didn't turn around. I wasn't going to beg for his support, and I wasn't going to soften what had already been decided. If he wanted to stand with me, it had to be because he chose it, not because I demanded it. Then, behind Daniel, I heard the sound of Lorna's voice again, sharp and biting. "Don't you dare chase after her. She's making a fool of herself. That child isn't your responsibility any more than she is ours. We can find you someone who will give you a real family, a proper family." The words landed like a slap. My chest tightened. Clara stirred, fussing softly as if she sensed the tension thickening behind me. I nearly stepped out into the night, but Daniel's next words stopped me in my tracks. "Mom, stop!" His voice was louder this time, steadier, carrying across the room. The sudden firmness in his tone shocked me so much that I turned my head slightly, just enough to see him standing there. His hands trembled at his sides, but his chin was raised, his eyes finally meeting mine. "I'm not going to let you talk about my daughter that way," he said, his voice growing stronger with every word. "Clara is my child, ours, and if you can't accept that, then you don't deserve to be in her life. Or in ours." Gasps rippled through the room. Lorna's face twisted in fury, her voice rising into a shrill pitch. "Daniel, you can't mean that. She's not blood. She'll never be a Carter. You're choosing her over your own mother?" Daniel took a deep breath, his voice low but unshakable. "I'm choosing my wife. I'm choosing my daughter. That's my family now. You don't get to define it for me." For the first time since I had met him, he stood tall against her. My breath caught in my throat, my chest aching with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride that he had finally spoken the truth, sorrow that it had taken this long. Lorna staggered back a step, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came. The power she had wielded over everyone in the room seemed to crumble in an instant. Her eyes darted from Daniel to me, then to Clara, as if searching for a crack she could exploit, but none remained. Marissa finally spoke, her voice firm and clear. "Evie, you were right. You shouldn't have to fight this battle alone. I should have said something earlier." She walked over and stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "Clara is my niece, and I love her. That's all that matters." My father, Henry, cleared his throat, his voice low and heavy with regret. "Your mother would have been proud of you, Evelyn. She believed in love above everything else. I should have spoken sooner, but I'm saying it now. Clara is my granddaughter, and nothing will ever change that." The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't heavy with shame, but filled with shifting loyalty, with the realization that Lorna's grip on the family was breaking apart. I turned fully to face them, Clara still resting against me. "Do you hear that?" I said, my voice steady. "This child is family. She is wanted, she is loved, and she belongs. If you can't accept that, then you don't belong in this home. Not anymore." Lorna's face flushed red, her lips tightening into a thin line. For once, she had no quick retort, no cruel remark. She simply stood there, shaking with rage, while the people around her began to move away, their silence no longer protecting her, but condemning her. Daniel stepped forward, his voice quieter now, but resolute. "Mom, you've lost the right to be part of this day. If you can't respect my wife and child, then you can leave." The finality of his words echoed louder than any shout. Lorna's eyes widened, her fury turning to disbelief. "You're choosing her over me," she demanded again, but no one answered. "Not Daniel? Not Henry? Not Marissa?" Her hands shook as she grabbed her purse from the chair, her movements jerky with anger. She muttered something under her breath, but no one stopped her as she stormed out the door, slamming it behind her. The sound of the door closing seemed to release the tension that had gripped the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering to one another, unsure what to say, but I didn't care about them. My eyes were on my daughter, safe in my arms, and on Daniel, who had finally stepped forward to stand with us. He walked up to me, his face pale but determined. "Evelyn, I should have said it sooner. I was scared, but I'm not anymore. You and Clara are my family. I'll never let her or you feel unwanted again." His words broke the last wall inside me. Tears burned in my eyes, but they weren't from pain this time. They were from relief, from knowing that for the first time, I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Marissa squeezed my arm. Henry wiped his eyes, and Clara let out a squeal, clapping her frosting-covered hands as if she knew she had won something far greater than a birthday party. That moment became the climax of everything, not just the party, but of years of silence, shame, and unspoken battles. It was the moment when the truth finally shattered the hold of cruelty, when the family's silence broke, and when love was chosen over blood. And standing there, holding my daughter in my arms, I knew this day would not be remembered for Lorna's words. It would be remembered for the moment we claimed our family's truth out loud. After the door slammed behind Lorna, the house felt strangely quiet. It wasn't the tense silence that had filled the room earlier. It was a silence of release, like the air after a storm when the winds calm and the heavy clouds drift away. Clara squirmed in my arms, reaching for the cake again, her little face smeared with frosting. She had no idea what had just happened, and I was grateful for that. She deserved to stay innocent a little longer. Daniel stood only a few feet from me, his chest rising and falling quickly as if he had just run a race. His eyes stayed on Clara, then on me. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "I should have stood up sooner, Evelyn. I let her control too much for too long. I'm sorry." I studied him for a moment. For years, I had hoped he would find his voice against his mother, but I had learned not to expect it. That day, though, something had shifted inside him. He hadn't just spoken against her. He had chosen us, out loud, in front of everyone. The weight of that settled into my chest like warmth spreading from a fire. "You said what mattered when it mattered most," I told him, "and that's what I'll remember." Marissa moved closer, brushing Clara's curls back from her forehead. "Evie, I froze. I hate that I did, but I'm proud of you. You didn't just protect Clara, you reminded all of us what family really means." My father stepped forward, his shoulders heavy with guilt. He looked older in that moment, lines carved deeper into his face. "I've lived too many years keeping the peace, letting people say cruel things so I wouldn't make waves. But you're right. Silence only helps the one doing harm. I should have spoken sooner, but I'll make sure my granddaughter knows exactly where I stand now. She is my family, no question." Hearing those words from him eased something inside me I hadn't even realized I was holding on to. For years, I had been the one to carry the weight of proving Clara's worth to people who questioned it. But now, I wasn't carrying it alone. The guests who remained tried to return to the party, picking at slices of cake, chatting softly, avoiding eye contact, but I barely noticed them. My focus was on Clara, still babbling happily, and on the people closest to me who had finally spoken the truth. Later that night, after everyone left and the house was quiet again, I sat in the rocking chair in Clara's room. She was curled against me, her breath soft and steady, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm. The glow of her nightlight painted the walls in warm gold, and I thought about everything that had happened. This house had been my mother's gift to me after she passed. She believed love was stronger than blood, and she lived that truth. She had always told me, "Family is who you choose, Evelyn. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, those words echoed louder than ever. I looked down at Clara, her little fingers still clutching the edge of her blanket. She didn't know the battle that had been fought for her that day, but one day she would. And when that time came, she would know her story didn't start with cruelty. It started with a mother who stood tall for her, a father who finally found his voice, and a family that chose love over silence. The lesson wasn't just for Clara, it was for me too. I had spent years bending, trying not to cause conflict, hoping kindness alone would be enough to change people like Lorna. But kindness without boundaries isn't strength. Strength is love that refuses to be stepped on, love that speaks out when silence becomes complicity. In the weeks that followed, Lorna tried calling Daniel, demanding apologies, insisting we had humiliated her. But he didn't bend. He told her clearly that until she could respect me and Clara, there was no place for her in our lives. That decision wasn't easy for him, but it was the beginning of something new. A family built on choice, not control. Clara grew, and with each milestone, her first steps, her first words, her second birthday, I carried that day in my heart. It was the day I learned that protecting her meant more than just keeping her fed and safe. It meant defending her identity, her place in this family, against anyone who tried to diminish it. And as I watched her giggle, clap her hands, and run through our living room months later, I realized the most important truth. She would never remember the cruel words said on her first birthday, but she would grow up surrounded by proof that those words had no power over her. That day, I walked away from silence. I walked into a life where my daughter would never question if she belonged. She did. She always would. Family is not blood. Family is who stands by you when you're most vulnerable, who chooses you when others turn away, who fights for you when silence could win. Family is love. And Clara will grow up knowing that she is not just loved. She is wanted. She is chosen. She is ours. That was Clara's story and mine too. It taught me that no matter who tries to tear us down, love is louder than cruelty. Blood doesn't make a family. Choice, the commitment, and unconditional love do. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand up for someone you love? Share your experience in the comments below. I read every one of them. And if you felt connected to this journey, please give this video a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful, real-life stories like this one. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next story.